guys, welcome back to my channel. Wanted to pop on and just chat a little bit about goals and plans for August because I'm working on a huge project for August, and I want to share it with you. There are lots of reading projects that I started this year, and so I wanted to make a little bit of a video where I talk about how I'm going to be amping up my progress, because just looking at where I am in terms of being on track to meeting my goals, not so much. So first, we're gonna do a little bit of a mid-year big book freakout, because I'm not completely doing the tag, but I am freaking out a little bit on my bookish goals and projects. I'm not on track to meet a lot of them, is what I'm saying. So here's me doubling down on my doubling down. Here's me trying to focus on them. So I saw Britta do the mid-year book freakout tag, and she only used the prompts that were relevant to her. So I'm just going to briefly say my number goal for this year was 150 books, and so far I've read 60 something books. Goodreads says that I am 18, or no, at the beginning of August Goodreads says I was 20 books behind schedule. But you know what? I have read 2 books since the beginning of August, and it's only August 3rd. So I'm saying that we could do this. We could totally do this and still meet our goals. So just looking at my number goal, no, I'm not on track to meeting it right now if I continue reading at the same pace, but I'm going to be reading faster or reading more. Details on that to follow. So questions from the mid-year book freakout tag. Best book that I've read this year, there have been so many. Just one that comes to mind really quickly, really readily, is best novel. I would say Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, because that book was just like really comprehensive in its look at a period of time in the United States of America, the drug epidemic in the United States, and what it means as we are all dealing with the fallout of it. There have just been so many novels. One of the best nonfiction books that I have read this year is Things I Have Withheld by Kai Miller, which we read for the RunwrightReads book club. We did, right? Yeah. I read so many Caribbean books in June, but that one focused on identity and how different people from very similar backgrounds have different identities, and how sometimes how you want to reach out to other people, the way you forge a common identity with other people isn't always successful. There's a lot about that book, but I did a whole discussion on that, so I'll link that down below if you want to hear more of my thoughts on one of the best nonfiction books that I have read. It was an essay collection. Then I read some amazing books for the BookTube Prize, and so another one of my favorite nonfiction reads has been Half American by Matthew F. Delmont, which talked about why African Americans were so intent on fighting the war against prejudice and discrimination that started with World War II, or started leading up to World War II. And yeah, there was just so much about this. So I talked about this in my discussion of the books that I read for the semifinals of the BookTube Prize, so you can go watch that video if you want to hear a little bit more about my thoughts on that. Sequel, I don't read a lot of sequels, but I have been getting into the Anne of Green Gables series, and I read Anne of the Island earlier this year, and I just love that character. I love the way L.M. Montgomery writes her character. And so then there's a question here about a new release that you haven't read yet but want to, and I'm gonna say this one just because I heard Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany talk about it recently, I think when she did the mid-year book freakout tag. So Lone Women by Victor Laval is a book that the publisher sent me recently, and I really want to get to it. I just haven't yet. So that's a new book that I'm hoping to get to soon. And my most anticipated release for the second half of the year, I don't follow a lot of books before they're published, but I do know that Elizabeth Acevedo has a new book coming out, I think in August. Was it published this week? I don't maybe So my most anticipated book, new upcoming release, my most anticipated book for the second half of the year is a new book by Elizabeth Acevedo, because I read some things from her earlier this year and I love her writing, and she's of Dominican background, so Caribbean author. Hello, Elizabeth Acevedo. Biggest disappointment, I'm gonna say, when I was looking through my list of books that I gave like two, I haven't given a book 2-star since this year. Most of the books that I have read have been good or great. But I'm going to say I'm probably most disappointed that I didn't love this more than I did, because the Siddhartha Mukherjee's book, The Emperor of Maladies, has been on my TBR for years and I haven't picked it up. But I finally read this for the BookTube prize and I thought I was going to love it more than I did, and it was just, in comparison with the other great books that I read around that time, it wasn't my clear favorite, and so I'm probably disappointed that I didn't love that. Like, it wasn't my number one book. It's probably my most disappointing experience. So, biggest surprise, I don't know. My biggest surprise has been that I haven't met my reading goals yet. I don't know that there's one book specifically that has been my biggest surprise, but I have read a lot of nonfiction books for the BookTube prize this year, and I am surprised by how much I love nonfiction. Like, you know, I enjoy nonfiction, but I found some books that were just like blow me over kind of reading. So my biggest surprise is that I am completely in the nonfiction boat again. So Heidi, sign me up for a buddy read soon, will you? Next question is favorite new to you author, and I don't know how to pick just one, because there have been a lot of really great books that I have read and said, man, I want to read everything by this author. But I'm going to say my favorite new to me author is Brianne McIver. I'm going to stay on brand and say Brianne McIver, who wrote The God of Good Looks, which is the book that we read as a group read for Caribathon in June. And Brianne McIver agreed to do a author chat with me back in June, and it didn't happen until July, but she stayed in touch with me and she made sure that it happened. Like, I was just so bowled over by her professionalism and her willingness, and besides that, I love the book and hope that you read the book if you haven't yet read it. So my favorite new to me author, Brianne McIver, God of Good Looks. Other questions from the mid-year book Freakout. I don't have fictional crushes or favorite characters from a book. There's no way I would remember that. But a book that made me cry recently was The Facemaker by Lindsay Fitzharris, which was about the soldiers who were hurt during World War I and the development of plastic surgery because of people suffering facial impairments and just needing their faces to be reconstructed, not just for aesthetic or cosmetic reasons, but because having facial infirmities really impacted their ability to live. And so yeah, there were places and pictures in that book that really moved me, and I cried. Books that made me happy, all of them, all the books, reading all the books made me happy. Next prompt is the most beautiful book you've bought or been gifted this year. I haven't bought a lot of books for myself, just because one of the things that I was supposed to be doing was to read 25 books from my shelf before I could buy anything for myself, and I have not yet finished reading 25 books from my shelves. Almost all the books that I have read this year have been from the library. The few books that I have read that didn't come from the library were books that the publishers sent me, which mean that they came in and I read them. They didn't come from my shelves. So I have not yet met that goal, which is terrible. So the last question on the mid-year book Freakout was books you need to read by the end of the year, and so that's just going to segue into my next statement. So again, need to read 150 books by the end of this year, or said I wanted to. I mean, need is a strong word, but right now I'm not in line to finishing that goal if I keep at the same pace. If I don't amp up my reading and read like a lot in the next few months, I will not meet my goal. And I really want to meet my goal because I didn't meet it last year. So one of the things that I'm doing in August, all of that, this is a preamble to say, all of the things that I'm doing in August is I'm going to be reading 30 books in 30 days. That's the plan, and that's the goal. And right now I'm on track. Right now I'm on track to doing it, because on the first day of the month I read this book, 140 something pages, and I finished it one day, and I finished it. And then I was supposed to have read this last month, and I started a reading vlog where I was going to be doing a one-day book, reading it in one day, and that didn't quite work out because I didn't get very far in the book. It turned out to be a much busier day than I had expected, so the vlog would have looked great, but there was no reading actually accomplished. So one of the things that I want to do is finish up some of those books that I started. I want to finish them this month, but there's a caveat. For books like this, I have to restart them. So this is only 170, 180 pages, right? So I'm reading it again in one day, but I started it today. One day, a one-day book in one day. So I started it again. So I'm not bringing over a lot of books into this month. It's not like books that I started all throughout the year. I'm just going to finish them and call them a book accomplished. There are going to be some books like that, but not books of this length. So I'm reading this in one day. And so that's 2 books. And then I have books like this one that was just gifted to me from the lovely Doris from Aldi Books. She sent this to me, and my daughter says it's hers. I think it's mine. We're going to share it. So this is a book that has little collections. It's a collection of bios on little leaders, bold women in Black history. And so we're going to be reading this together. The plan is to read this as a bio each night. I'll read to my daughter before she goes to bed or sometime during the day. So this is a book that I will finish over the course of the month, right? So plans like that. So the reason that this video has all those titles is that this is also my TBR for the month. So some of the small books that I found when I went to the library include this one, which I told you read already, In the Company of Men by Veronique Tajo, Frank Plantain by Zalika Reed Benta, which I actually started reading in June but didn't finish, so I'm gonna restart. I'm gonna restart this book and just read it in its entirety. This is short stories, Frank Plantain by Zalika Reed Benta. I guess I said that already. Another Brooklyn by Jacqueline Woodson, and Your Nostalgia is Killing Me, Link Stories by John Ware, Paradise by Abdul Razak Gurna, Trick by Dominica Starnone, Brother Man by Roger Mays. I'm hoping to buddy read this with the lovely Sherry from Diverse PhD Reads. This is a book that both of us have started reading or tried to read for a while now, and it's a Jamaican author. We should be able to read this, right? Caribbean fiction. Yeah, we're going to try to get back to that. This is from Britta's 1001 Books, one of the titles that I called. I've taken this book out from the library now. This is maybe my 4th time checking it out, and I have not read it yet. So hoping to read it in August. This is Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro. This is an Argentinian author. Yeah, and it's translated by Francis Riddle. Elevation by Stephen King. Again, taken this home from the library before and need to read it. Want to read it. This is going to be my introduction to Stephen King. Then the Run Right Reads book club selection, which is Green Days by the River by Michael Anthony, which I may be reading a Kindle version, so I don't have a physical copy to show you. But yeah, lots of books. I know I just showed you like a lot of titles, and that's because all of these are really short, really approachable. So hoping to read 30 books in 30 days in August. I'll give you updates as I make progress. So would love to hear from you. What's on your reading plans for the rest of this month? If you've done a check-in on your 2023 goals, let me know how you're making progress with that, if you're in line or on track to meet your goals this year. I am. I'm going to go out in faith and say right now I am, because I have all these things that I'm planning to read in August, and if I do that, I know I'll get back on track. We'll see how it goes. You're gonna have to stay tuned if you want to see how I do, and of course get motivation for you to read more as well. That's the plan, right? So thank you so much for watching. We'll be back soon with another video, and I hope you join me for it. Until then, happy reading. Bye.